To present the first PDP live lesson of this lockdown period, and this morning we're going to be focusing in on one of our key strengths, which is resilience, and we're going to be thinking about building our character muscles. So we're going to be thinking about which kind of character traits we exhibit in everyday life, and we're going to be looking at an example of a young lady who's exhibited enormous amounts of resilience in her life and how she has had a huge amount of success as a result of that resilience. Now, before we go any further with the presentation, we just wanted to introduce ourselves so that you are really clear about who we are. So my name is Mrs. Morris. Many of you will know me, and I will have taught quite a few of you. And of course, I set all the PDP work, so you'll be used to getting homework on Satchel 1 from me every week. And I just wanted to say a huge thank you for everything that has been sent in to me. So all the PDP work that you've been sending to me and to your tutors, and the lockdown successes. It's been so lovely to get your photos of amazing baking and artwork and all the things that you've been doing. And I think it's given a real sense of community spirit to see how people celebrated the VE Day celebrations and what they've been doing every week. So hopefully it's given you some ideas for what you could be doing as well over the summer months, because it's nice to try new skills and to do things during this lockdown period that maybe we wouldn't have had time for before.
Hi everyone, so I'm Mrs. McKenzie. I started at the college at Christmas, so most of you will have seen me around, and I might even teach some of you for your English lessons. Really excited about our live event today, and we hope you enjoy taking part and reflecting on all the questions and the topics that we explore today.
Okay, so our first thing to think about is some dilemmas. Would you rather? So the first one here is, would you rather go for a week without internet or a day without food? That's quite a difficult one, isn't it? What do you think, Miss McKenzie?
Yeah, I mean, food's quite important to me, so I would really struggle with that, even for just a day, even though I know that there might be people that have to do that. But obviously the internet, especially nowadays, is something that we find really useful with work and with communicating with friends and family. So it's a really difficult one, actually.
It is, because you couldn't really do your day's work without the internet at all. But no. I would not like to go for a whole day without food, I have to say. The second one then, would you rather be able to drink only one glass of clean water a day or 3 litres of dirty water a day? Now that's really brings home, doesn't it, just the fact that many of the things that we take for granted, like internet access, food when we want it, clean water that comes out of a tap, that isn't available for everybody in all parts of the world every single day. It's a really hard one, that, isn't it? What would you say?
Yeah, I would really struggle with that, because I quite like, I drink lots of fluids in the day, and 1 glass seems so little. When we're recommended to drink, a certain amount to be healthy. So then to have more of it, but possibly that then be dirty and it could get you unwell. And again, another really difficult decision to make, and really sad to think that there's lots of people in the world that would have to consider, well, would even have the option potentially of just 1 glass of clean water either, or might have to share that with others.
And so many diseases are waterborne, aren't they? That having the 3 litres of dirty water could be a real health risk. And then the third one, would you rather walk an hour and back to school every day, so that's 2 hours of walking every day, or have no education at all? Now that's an interesting one. That's making us think about the value of education, really, isn't it, more than anything else, and how perhaps sometimes it's easy to take for granted in England, because school is available for everybody. In fact, it's compulsory for everybody. So it can be something that perhaps we tend to moan about rather than to see the amazing value of it and how incredibly lucky we are. And just how far some young people have to go in order to make sure that they get that education. So these 3 questions are to just get us thinking about, I guess, how different some people's lives are around the world, and how easy it is to take for granted the things that are actually really, really precious and really important, and that when you start thinking about taking them out of your life, you realise just how many things we have available to us.
Okay, so today we're going to talk about someone that is massively inspirational and someone I've spoken about for years actually in a lot of my RE lessons and informed time at previous schools as well. And it's really important that we talk about Malala Yousafzai today because it happens to fall on a time this Sunday on the 12th of July when it's known in calendars as Malala Day, and that is because of the resilience that she's shown and the difficulties and real hard times that she's had to go through in her life, and that's made her known and famous worldwide. So we're going to talk a little bit about her today. So just a quick reminder of who Malala is. I'm sure most of you will recognise her picture. Many of you will recognise the name Malala Yousafzai, and you may have heard about her from in the news, from being one of the youngest people to win the Nobel Peace Prize. You may have heard about her originally writing some reports and blogs and things for BBC News. You will have heard of her in some format because of the difficulties she's gone through and the things that she's achieved ever since then, which happened quite a while ago now, really. So just a little bit about Malala, just as a bit of a reminder if you're not quite sure about her. So she was born on the 12th of July in Mingora in Pakistan. So if you think about geography and whereabouts that is in the world, she wasn't born in our country, and she was born miles and miles away from us. Yet we heard about her story from quite early on. She was born at home with the help of her neighbours, her family, didn't have enough money for a hospital birth, which again is very different from the lives that we all have had here and potentially our births while we were here. She had parents, and she also had two brothers that were a big part of her life, and she talks a lot about them and how they've helped her to achieve the things that she has done in her lifetime. Next slide. Thank you. So her education, and this is a big part of her struggles really, is that she is a Muslim and she follows the Quran, and in the Quran it states that all Muslims should acquire knowledge. It's something that we should do as human beings, is to learn, learn and learn. And this influenced Malala's father, who believed that education was for everyone. He was actually a teacher, and he set up a number of different schools in Pakistan, one of which his own daughter attended. And so Malala attended a public school. This is back in 2012. It's a high school, and she attended there between 2013 and 2017, and then Lady Margaret Hall in Oxford from October 2017 as well. So Malala's journey and what we're going to talk about today is a lot to do with her right to go to school and how that differs around the world, especially if you're a girl.
Okay, thanks a lot, Miss. Right, the next slide then that we're looking at here is about the problems that Malala and other girls in her area faced. So in 2007, in Afghanistan, the Taliban took control of the country, and they banned education for girls over the age of 8. So that meant that no girl was allowed to go to school. They also banned a lot of other different cultural aspects of life really that we take for granted, so things like watching television, listening to music, playing live music, dancing, so expressions really of kind of freedom, I guess, and quite things that we associate with joy and having pleasure. Malala, however, continued to believe in her right, and of course the right of every single girl, to an education. And she became quite an outspoken critic of the Taliban. She refused to just accept that she wasn't allowed to go to school. So she decided that she needed to fight back and make a very public fight back against this, because she couldn't see why her brothers could go to school, but that she wasn't allowed to. So what Malala did was that she began to write a blog. And she wrote this blog for the BBC Urdu service, and that started in 2009. So she used a pseudonym, which is where you make up a name really, and you sign that name instead of your own name, because of course it was very, very dangerous to publicly put your name on something that was critical of the Taliban, because the Taliban were very powerful and had threatened violence. in her blog, she described how she was desperate to go to school and how important education was to her and her future, and her fears of living under the Taliban rule, and not just her fears of everyday life, but the impact that that would have on a whole generation of young women who would be denied the right to an education and therefore would make a career very difficult. And at the time, women were being stopped from going out shopping, and that basically women were not allowed out on the street without a male relative as a chaperone. Basically, women were expected to stay at home. Now, Malala and her father began to receive death threats for speaking out, but they refused to be quiet. They did not stop reporting what was happening. And in fact, they became very, very well known in Pakistan for their beliefs. And Malala was actually awarded Pakistan's National Youth Peace Prize for her work in 2011. So there were many, many people that supported Malala and her cause, and many young girls that were just as eager to have their education as Malala.
Okay, so we're going to look at some really key events, things that happened with Malala, now that we've given you sort of an overview and some of the things that she's achieved. But something that's very famous and part of her story you may have heard is that while she was travelling home from school on a bus, this is back in 2012 on the 9th of October, when she was just 15 years old, so not much older than you guys, she was shot in the head by a masked Taliban gunman. And two of her friends were also injured in the attack, so she had to witness and experience her friends and their hurt and pain as well. Because of all of that, Malala was then flown to our country, to Birmingham in the UK for treatment, and she stayed in hospital for 3 months because of her injuries. Some would say it was miraculous that she actually survived, and this story was well documented and was all over the news, with people hearing about this young girl and what happened to her, mainly because she felt that it was her right to go to school and she was treated and injured in this way. And in March 2013, she was able to go to school in Birmingham because of what happened. And later that year, she published a book, and it's called I Am Malala, describing her experiences. I actually have a couple of copies of this book. So when we have you back in, if any of you want to have a read of it, it's a really inspirational book that talks through all the events from first hand in her writing of what actually happened to her and the things she achieved because of her resilience and her perseverance. So, looking back at what had happened, the Taliban's attack on Malala, it led to widespread protests, as you can imagine, across Pakistan and the world. They were in shock over what had happened. Over 2 million people signed the Right to Education petition, and the Right to Free and Compulsory Education bill was passed in Pakistan. So because of what happened to Malala and the media coverage of it, and people's shock at what had happened and the controversy over it all, led to some really positive things in the end for the human rights of lots of girls and young people in Pakistan. And now every child in Pakistan is given this chance, like all of you guys, to go to school. In 2013, the Malala Fund was then set up, and that organisation, it campaigns and fights for and stands up for all girls to have 12 years of education, just like other young people there as well. And Malala still actively campaigns, and you may still see her in the news, magazines, around media, social media all the time, with her promoting the rights of girls around the world to be entitled to and be allowed to go to school and be educated. All stemming, of course, from her religious beliefs that everyone has a right to knowledge, but whether you follow a religion or not, we all know the importance of learning and being educated for our futures.
So Malala's journey then continued to the peak, really, of being awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. So from being a 15-year-old schoolgirl in Pakistan to being awarded one of the most prestigious prizes that exists in the world is such a journey, and it just shows what one individual can achieve. So her tireless campaigning was recognised in 2014, and she became the co-recipient of the Nobel Peace Prize. So it was awarded to two people at the same time, and she shared the prize with Kailash Satyarthi, who's a children's rights activist from India, so spanning also the divide between India and Pakistan. So it was a really lovely prize that put children at the centre of human rights and said that every child deserves equal rights to education and to a good standard of living. And at the age of 17, Malala is the youngest ever recipient of the Nobel Peace Prize. Now, the money that she won as part of that prize, $500,000, she put into building a secondary school for girls in Pakistan. So that's to ensure that girls have an education past primary and through secondary level, so that eventually they can then study for degrees and then go into careers of their choice. And this has happened just over the last few weeks since we have been in lockdown. Malala has actually graduated now from Oxford University, and you can see in those pictures just how kind of joyous the celebrations have been. And she said, hard to express my joy and gratitude right now as I completed my philosophy, politics and economics degree at Oxford. And she shared a picture with her family, and one taken after a trashing. So that picture where she's covered in flour and confetti and various bits and bobs is a kind of tradition at the end of finals in Oxford. Students kind of throw things at each other in celebration. So she's had an amazing educational journey from Pakistan to secondary school in England and then through to graduating from Oxford University. So in the next slide, we're going to now show you a little video about the events of Malala's life and some words directly from Malala.
Women have the same rights as men. If a man can go to school, if a boy can go to school, why can't a girl? If I don't go to school, then I would be obeying my brother and my father. I would be washing clothes every day, and then I would marry, then I would be taking care of children, and my life would finish. Those people who stop us from getting education, they are afraid of educated and powerful women. There was a correspondent of BBC, and he asked my father, I want someone from Swat who can speak to me and who can tell me what's happening there. So I started blogging for BBC. I used to talk to him on phone every night. We all wanted education, but so many people were silent because they were afraid of Taliban, they were afraid of death. But the courage defeated that fear. That is why I spoke. I was not waiting for someone else. I did it by myself. At 12 o'clock, I think so, we just sat in our school bus, and I asked my driver, can you do the magic tricks? And he was just hiding a stone in his hand, and we had to find it. And I don't know, I just opened my eyes and I was in a hospital. I knew that I was shot, and the first thing I did was I thanked God that I am alive. In my country, Pakistan, and all over the world, girls raised the slogan of I am Malala. They raised their voice for education, and they raised their voice against terrorism. So it is an honor for me because I need more and more girls and women and more boys to support me in my campaign for education. When the Taliban shot me, they thought that the other girls who are speaking for their rights would also stop. And they thought that they would spread fear, terror, but they failed. I believe that if you are sincere to your own heart, then you can do anything. And I can do anything. Women.
Okay, so we've spent some time now looking at Malala and this massive journey that she's been on, and we've just got some questions really that we want to pose to you just to sit and think about, but also you have the opportunity during this session now to use the chat function, and if you've got anything you want to say, if you've got any questions that you have, whether it's to do with what we're speaking about right now and the questions we're going to pose, or anything that we've discussed already, then please do type those in, and if we don't have a chance to look at them all right now, because there might be quite a lot coming in as we're presenting, and then we'll sit and read through all of them after, and provide feedback for that, and it's something potentially we can look at in form time and in PDP sessions and in RE as well. So those comments and questions that you pose will be really helpful for us. So there are two questions we're going to begin with, and we'd really like to know your opinions and your views, so please do type away if you'd like to share those, or if you just want to have a think in your head. And the first one is, how would you feel if your basic right to an education was taken away? And I suppose in some ways we can try and relate to that in as best we can, although our circumstances might be very different. So your education recently has been a bit different than what it has been before, and in some ways that's something that many generations in the past might not have had to go through, that you now can relate a little bit more to. So have a think about that, your feelings of what's been happening, and then what's happened to Malala and how you can relate to that. And what would your life be like if it were in the same manner as what happened to Malala, and where she was living and what happened to her?
Yeah, because it's easy to take education for granted, isn't it? Because it's something that is there, and it's just part of our lives, and we know we have to go to school, and we will go through the process, and then we'll come out at the end of it with our examinations. So we kind of take it for granted, and sometimes it seems like quite hard work. But when you think of a world without education, so, you know, lots and lots of people in lots of parts of the world that are deprived of an education aren't even able to write their own name or to read anything. And if you think about the implications that that would have for understanding the world, finding out what's happening in the world around you, the limitations it would place on what you were able to do as a job and a career, then it suddenly puts it into a bit more perspective, don't you think this?
It really does, and it might be something you've thought about before. When you hear these stories in the news of lives that are different from yours, sometimes you might not quite take it in because it doesn't seem believable, but taking that time to sit and think about it is really quite important for us to see that although we all go through difficult things in our lives, also just showing that compassion and thinking about others as well can really help you in your own life too.
Okay, the second question that we'd like your opinion on is an even harder dilemma, perhaps. So what's your view on this? If your life was at risk, would you continue to stand up for your rights and for what you believe in? Now, I think we'd all like to think that we would, because it sounds courageous and it sounds very bold, doesn't it? But you think the amount of real courage, if you are staring at possible violence, possible aggression, possible violence against your family as well, for standing up for what you believe in. And it just, I think for me, makes me just stop and think at how incredibly brave and committed and angry as well, I guess, Malala was, in order to have the strength to do what she did and to continue with it, even when it became clear that people did know who she was writing the blog, and she refused to be silent. So from my point of view, I just can't really be anything other than you know, in awe really of that degree of kind of commitment to your principles. She was incredibly brave.
Yeah, I agree. But, as much as I have passions of my own about things that are right and wrong, Malala knew that she was putting her life at risk, and you know, the others with her as well, in doing what they thought was right. And it's just, you know, inspiring to show her commitment to that, because naturally, obviously, you know, we think about our lives and we think about survival and protecting ourselves and being safe. But obviously for many people in history, and including Malala, as much as they want that to happen and they want to be safe and they want to live, the things that are happening around them are so bad that they feel that they have to sometimes stand up, even if that is putting their lives and other lives at risk, to try and bring about change.
And perhaps it makes us think about our own lives as well. And sometimes when we stand back and don't step in, when we know that something wrong is happening, because it just seems easier to not get involved, or we don't want to be called somebody who's kind of, getting meddling with something that doesn't interfere with their lives at all. So perhaps if we think about all kinds of situations perhaps of bullying or name calling, or there's lots of situations where we could say something and sometimes we choose not to. So it's not quite as drastic as standing up against somebody with a gun, but we might sometimes lack a little bit of courage in our own lives. And I think the inspiration from somebody like Malala, who took such a massive step, just reminds us that it is important to have principles and to stick to those principles, and to not just say that you're a good person and that you don't believe in bullying or you don't believe in people picking on other people or whatever, but sometimes it means standing out and actually intervening in those situations as well. So it makes me think about my behaviour and my kind of principles a little bit as well.
Yeah. It'd be great to know what you think about all of this. So if you haven't been typing away already, please just take some time to type in some of the thoughts that you have about all of these questions that we're posing for you, and any questions that you might still have as well. Okay, so we're really thinking about the resilience that Malala has shown for all of this, and we have a couple more questions just for us all to think about. So the first one is, what difficulties has Malala had to overcome so far in her life? So if you think about sort of this journey or this timeline of events in her life and the difficulties that she's had to go through and then overcome at quite a young age, really, as well. She's still a very young girl who's got the rest of her life ahead of her and has gone through things that, we'll hopefully never have to experience anywhere near in our life. So have a think about those, and if you want to type away now just any of the events that you can remember that we've discussed so far, type those in for us and we can put them together after, just to see whether we've come up with this sort of timeline of events, or if there's all worked together as a team. So type those away for us now, please. And then the second question is, do you know of other people in your life who've had to overcome similar obstacles? And I think it's really important to always look at these inspirational figures and try and relate events and things that's happened with them and things that they've done to our own lives, because all of you will have probably someone in your life that you look at that has maybe had to go through something really difficult for them and they've had to overcome it.
Yeah, and I think in particular thinking about when there's a sudden change, all of a sudden she went from, just being a schoolgirl with her friends, with her family around her, and then all of a sudden she had to come to a completely different country. She had to get used to a very different education system. She had to have a whole new circle of friends, and not only did she cope with it all, but she absolutely thrived, to get such amazing A-level results and then get into Oxford University. So she took every bit of adversity and she worked to battle through and to get where she wanted to go to. And we may not have had such quite an epic journey of that in our lives, but many people will know people that have had to overcome perhaps a sudden disability caused by an illness or an accident, perhaps may have had to move house and move far away from the friends that they knew as young children and have to kind of start again. And all of these things are big life-changing events. So it's looking at where resilience is built up really in people that you know and your own life as well. Okay, and that brings us to our final slides, where it's really over to you to have a little think about your own life and your own character. So what we've got here is a list of character traits, if you like, traits that help you to build your resilience and your success. And next year, you're going to hear quite a lot in lessons and around the college about character muscles and building up our character muscles, because character muscles are something that we can strengthen. If we use them a lot and we identify them, then we can get better at using them and they can get bigger and more efficient. So we've got a list here of personality traits, and what I would like you to do is, on the next slide, there is an outline of the figure in the middle, our superhero figure. And you can see that there's room inside to write, and of course you can write outside. So what we'd like is if you could write 5 characteristics you think that you already have inside, and then on the outside 5 areas that you think you probably need to target, that you could do with a bit of improvement on. And if you could keep that on a piece of paper and bring it in when we return after the summer to your tutor, then that will be a really useful thing to put into your PDP book that will be the beginning of thinking about our character muscles. So there's quite a long list here. The first one, perseverance. So perseverance just means keep going, keep trying, not giving up, but carrying on and doing it again if you fail the first time. Creativity, so that's the ability to do anything creative, really, to think in a creative way, to perhaps think in terms of pictures and music and colours, and to do something in a different way other than perhaps the one that is most obvious. Communication, so that's obviously talking, writing, but also listening to other people as well and taking on board what they're saying. Kindness and caring. Confidence, and this might be something that maybe is one of the ones you need to build up for some of you, perhaps. Concentration, now that may have been something that you've been thinking about when you've been working during lockdown, how well your concentration has gone. For some of you, perhaps you've built up more concentration because you've been sat online learning. For some of you, perhaps concentration has been a real issue. So I think you'll know whether that's one of your strengths or one of your targets. Teamwork, how good are you at working with other people? Do you collaborate? Do you give and take rather than kind of boss other people about or not do your share, I guess, of the work? So how good are you at working together? Enthusiasm, you know, how enthusiastic are you about things and new things and perhaps things that you hadn't necessarily thought you would enjoy? Do you approach it with a positive mindset? Or is that something, again, that you need to work on, perhaps? Independence. Are you able to do things on your own? Do you always need somebody there to help you through each stage? Or are you able to just kind of take it and run with it yourself? Curiosity and love of learning. Perhaps you've done something completely new during this lockdown period. Perhaps you've started to learn Spanish or done something that you thought you had the opportunity to do, but not necessarily the time in everyday life. So perhaps that's something that you've found that you're really good at. Self-control, how good are you at putting off the things that you want when you know there's something else that you really need to be doing? And that could be anything from trying to stay off the Xbox for a few hours while you do your schoolwork, to not having all the sweets at the same time and to leave a few for your little sister or to have tomorrow or whatever. Courage. Now, obviously, we've been talking about Malala's story, which is full of courage. How courageous do you think you are? Is that one of your strong points or something you could work on? Empathy. Are you able to kind of put yourself in someone else's shoes? Are you able to understand how other people might feel, even if it's a situation that's very, very different from your own? So again, with the story that we're talking about today, with Malala's story, are you able to kind of understand some of the feelings that she would have had in her situation? Humour is a good one. You know, do you approach situations with humour? Are you able to make light of situations? Because that's something that really does raise people's spirits if you can do it in the right way. It's a very positive trait to have. Integrity. So this is having strong moral principles and living by those principles. So being honest, being true to your word, having a sense of a kind of moral code or a sense of honour, if you like. Reasoning. Are you good at working things out? Can you take a logical path through things? Reflecting and revising. So are you good at looking critically at your own achievements and your own work and thinking, where could we improve? So are you good at the kind of WWWEBI part of a lesson, or is that something that you need to work on? Optimism. Have you got a kind of, the glass is half empty? So I'm kind of looking on the dark side, or the glass is half full sort of personality? So do you look on the bright side more than the dark side? Friendship, are you good at friendship and maintaining friendships and listening to your friends and kind of a bit of give and take in that relationship? And then the final one, listening. Are you good at actually listening and taking in what somebody's saying to you and then responding to it, rather than just kind of still thinking the same thing that you thought before and saying the same thing that before you heard what your friend was saying to you? Now, there's loads there. I only want you to choose 5 that you think you're really, really strong at, and 5 that you think you could target. So on the final slide, there is a template, and we will send this PowerPoint through to you so you can print this one out, and then you can use that, or of course you can just draw the outline on a sheet of paper. So we would really love it if you could put as many comments or answers to the questions that we've had in the chat function, and we will respond to those and use them in future lessons as well. But this would be a task I would like everybody to do, so that you all have one of these character sheets of 5 things that you think you are strong at, and then around the outside, 5 things that you think you need to target. Right, I think we've just about come to the end of our live lesson, Miss McKenzie. It's been a real pleasure, and I hope that you've enjoyed it anywhere near as much as we both have. And we look forward very much to seeing you after the summer holiday. So have a great summer, stay safe, and take photos of any successes and things you get up to, because we will no doubt do another collection of those in the autumn term.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.